Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today we are going to discuss about the history of Indian economy. So let's start it. For a continuous duration of nearly 1700 years from the year 180, India was the topmost economy constituting 35 to 40% of the world GDP. The combination of protectionist import substitution, Fabian socialism and social democratic inspired policies governed India for some time after the end of the British rules. The economy was then characterized as derisive. It had extensive regulation, protectionism, public ownership of large monopolies, pervasive corruption, and low growth. Since 1991, continuing economic liberalization has moved the country towards a market-based economy. By 2008, India had established itself as one of the world's faster-growing economies. Then the ancient and medieval eras, Indus Valley civilization. The citizen of the Indus Valley civilization, a permanent settlement that flourished between 2800 BC and 1800 BC, practiced agriculture, domesticated animals, used uniform weight and measures, made tools and weapons, and traded with other cities. Evidence of well-planned streets, a drainage system, a water supply reveals that knowledge of the urban planning, which included the first known urban sanitation system and the existence of a form of municipal government. Then the West Coast. Maritime trade was carried out extensively between South India and Southeast and West Asia from early times until around the 14th century AD. Both the Malabar and Coromandel coast were the sites of important trading center from as early as the 1st century BC, used for import and export as well as transit points between the Mediterranean region and Southeast Asia. Over time, traders organized themselves into associations which received state patronage. Historians Tapan Rai Chaudhary and Irfan Habib claims this stage patronage for overseas trade came to an end by the 13th century AD when it was largely taken over by the local Paris Jewish, Syrian, Christian, and Muslim communities, initially on the Malabar and subsequently on the Coromandel coast. Then the Silk Route. Other scholars suggest trading from India to West Asia and Eastern Europe was active between the 14th and 18th centuries. During this period, Indians traders settled in Surakhani, a suburb of Greater Baku, Uzbekistan. These traders built a Hindu temple, which suggests commerce was active and prosperous for Indians by the 17th century. Further north and Saurashtra and Bengal coast played an important role the maritime trade and the Gangetic plans, and the Indus Valley housed several centers of river-borne commerce. Most overland trade was carried out via the Khyber Pass, connecting the Punjab region with Afghanistan, onward to the Middle East and Central Asia. Although many kingdoms and rulers issued coins, barter was prevalent. Villagers paid a portion of their agricultural produce as revenue to the rulers, while their craftsmen received a part of the crops at harvest time for their service. Then the Mughal era is 1526 to 1793. Main article is Mughal economy. The Indian economy was large and prosperous under the Mughal Empire up until the 18th century. Seen Harkin estimates, China and India may have accounted for 60 to 70% of world GDP in the 17th century. The Mughal economy functioned on a elaborate system of coin currency, land revenue and trade. Gold, silver, and copper coins were issued by the royal mints, which functioned on the basic of free coinage. The political stability and uniform revenue policy resulting from a centralized administration under the Mughals, coupled with a well developed internal trade network, ensured that India, before the arrival of the British, was to large extent economically unified despite having a traditional agrarian economy characterized by a predominance of substance agriculture. Agriculture production increased under Mughal agrarian reforms, with Indian agriculture being advanced compared to Europe at the time, such as the widespread use of seed drill among Indian peasants before it adoption of European agriculture, and possibly higher per capita agricultural output and standards of consumption than 17th century Europe. The Mughal Empire had a thriving industrial manufacturing economy, with India producing about 25% of the world industrial output up until 1750, making it the most important manufacturing center in international trade. Manufactured goods and cast crops from the Mughal Empire were sold throughout the world. Key industries included textile, shop building, and steel, and proceed export included cotton, textile, yarns, thread, silk, jute products, metalwares, and food such as sugar, oil, and butter. Cities and towns boomed under the Mughal Empire, which had a relatively high degree of urbanization for its time, with 15% of its population living in urban centers, higher than the percentage of the urban population in contemporary Europe at the time, and higher than that of British India in the 19th century. In early modern Europe, there was significant demand for products from Mughal India, particularly cotton, textile, as well as goods such as spices, papers, indigo, silk, and salt pepper for use of munitions. Europeans' fashion, for example, become increasingly dependent on Mughal Indian textile and silks. From the late 17th century to the early 18th century, Mughal India accounted for 95% of British imports from Asia, and the Bengal sub Suba province along accounted for 40% of Dutch imports from Asia. In contrast, there was very little demand for European goods in Mughal India, which was largely self-sufficient. Indian goods, especially those from Bengal, were also exported in large quantities in other Asian markets such as Indonesia and Japan. At the time, Mughal Bengal was the most important center of cotton textile production. Then, in the early 18th century, the Mughal Empire declined as it lost western, central, and parts of South and North India to the Maratha Empire, which integrated and continues to administer those regions. The decline of the Mughal Empire led to decreased agricultural productivity, which in turns negatively affected the textile industry. The subcontinent dominant economic power in the post Mughal era was the Bengal Suba in the east, which continues to maintain thriving textile industries and relatively high real wages. However, the former was devastated by the Maratha invasions of Bengal, and the British colonization in the mid 18th century. After the loss at the Third Battle of Panipat, the Maratha Empire disintegrated into several confederate states, and the resulting potential instability and armed conflict severely affected economic life in several parts of the country. Although this was mitigated by localized prosperity in the new provisional kingdoms. By the late 18th century, the British East India Company had entered the Indian political threat and established its dominance over the European powers. This marked a determinative shift in Indian trade and a less powerful impact on the rest of the economy. Then the British era, 1793 to 1947. Main article: Economy of India under company rule and economy of India under the British Raj. So there is no doubt that our Grievance against the British Empire had a sound basic, as the painstaking statistical work of a Cambridge historian Angus Madison has known. India's share of world income collapsed from 22.6% in 1700, almost equal to Europe's share of 23.3%. At that time, to as low as 3.8% in 1952. Indeed, at the beginning of the 20th century, the jewel in the British crown was the poorest
Brightest.
country in the world in terms of per capita income. From the beginning of the 19th century, the British East India Company gradual expansion and consolidation of power brought a major change in taxation and agricultural policies, which tended to promote commercialization of agriculture with a focus on trade, resulting in decreased production of food crops, mass improvisement, and destruction of farmers, destitution of farmers, and in the short term led to numerous famines. The economic policies of the British Raj caused a severe decline in the handicraft and handloom sectors due to reduced demand and dipping employment. After the removal of international restrictions by the Charter of 1813, Indian trade expanded substantially with steady growth. The result was a significant transfer of capital from India to England, which, due to the colonial policies of the British, led to a massive drain of revenue rather than any systematic effort at modernization of the domestic economy. Under British rules, India's share of the world economy declined from 24.4% in 1700 down to 4.2% in 1950. India's GDP purchasing power parity per capita was stagnant during the Mughal Empire and began to decline prior to the one set of British rules. India's share of global industrial output declined from 25% in 1750 down to 2% in 1900. At the same time, the United Kingdom share of the world economy rose from 2.9% in 1700 up to 9% in 1870. The British East India Company, following their conquest of Bengal in 1757, had forced open the large Indian market to British goods, which could be sold in India without tariff or duties, compared to local Indian producers who were heavily taxed. While in Britain, protectionist policies such as bans and high tariff were implemented to restrict Indian textile from being sold there. Whereas raw cotton was imported from India without tariff to British factories, which manufactured textile from Indian cotton and sold them back to the Indian market. British economic policies give them a monopoly over India's large market and cotton resources. India served as both a significant supplier of raw goods to British manufacturers and a large captive market. British manufactured goods. British territorial expansion in India throughout the 19th century created an industrial environment that, on paper, guaranteed property rights among the colonizers, encouraged free trade, and created a single currency with fixed exchange rates, standardized weights and measures, and capital markets within the company held territories. It also established a system of railways and telegraphs, a civil service that aimed to be free from political interface, a common law, and an adversarial legal system. This coincide with major changes in the world economy, industrialization, and significant growth in production and trade. However, at the end of the colonial rule, India inherited an economy that was one of the poorest in the developing world, with industrial development slaughtered, agriculture unable to feed a rapidly growing population, a largely illiterate and unskilled labor force, and extremely inadequate infrastructure. The 1872 census revealed that 91.3% of the population of the region constituting present day India resided in villages. There was a decline from the earlier Mughal era when 85% of the population resided in villages and 15% in urban centers under Akbar region in 1600. Urbanization generally remained sluggish in British India until the 1920s due to the lack of industrialization and absence of adequate transportation. Subsequently, the policy of discriminating protection, where certain important industries were given financial protection by the state, coupled with the Second World War, saw the development and dispersal of industries, encouraging rural-urban migration, and the particular the large port cities of Bombay, Calcutta, and Madras grew rapidly. Despite this, only one-sixth of the Indian population lived in the cities by 1951. The impact of the British rule on Indian economy is a controversial topic. Leaders of the Indian independence movement and economic historians have blamed colonial rules for the dismal state of Indian economy, its aftermath, and argued that financial strength required for industrial development in Britain was derived from the wealth taken from India. At the same time, right-wing historians have countered that India's low economic performance was due to various sectors being in a state of growth and decline due to changes brought in by colonialism, and a world that was moving towards industrialization and economic integration. Several economic historians have Several economic historians have argued that real wages decline occurred in the early 19th century or possibly beginning in the very late 18th century, largely as a result of British imperialism. According to Prasanna Parthasarathi and Sasi Sivaramakrishnan, the gain wages of Indian weavers were likely comparable to that of their British counterparts, and their average income was around 5 times the substance level subsistence level, which was comparable to advanced parts of Europe. However, they concluded that due to the scarcity of data, it was hard to draw definitive conclusions, and that more research was required. It has also been argued that India went through a period of deindustrialization in the later half of the 18th century as an indirect outcome of the collapse of the Mughal Empire. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoy my video. It's a very informative video. Okay, until the next video, thank you very much. Please like and subscribe my channel.